Through the burning palace. The harvest moon hung swollen and amber over Ashvaran's palace when the first screams shattered the night. Darian Voss had been standing his usual post outside the lesser gallery, watching nobles drift past in their festival silks, when the explosion of cursed black fire tore through the eastern wing. The flames weren't natural, they moved with serpentine intelligence, seeking and devouring with terrible purpose. Shadow cult, someone shrieked as guests stampeded toward the exits. Darian's hand went to his sword, instinct overriding the paralysis of shock. He'd heard rumors of the Shadow Weavers, fanatics who believed the Flameheart bloodline was an abomination that needed purging from the world. He'd dismissed them as superstition. Not anymore. The Queen. A royal guard crashed past him, uniform scorched and smoking. They're targeting the Queen's chambers. Darian's heart lurched. For 3 years he'd served in these halls, and for 3 years he'd harbored a secret that could cost him everything. He was hopelessly, impossibly in love with Queen Lyanna Embervale. He'd memorized the way candlelight caught copper in her dark auburn hair, the quiet strength in her rare smiles, the graceful authority in every gesture. She'd never spoken more than a dozen words to him. He was nothing, a common-born sentinel who'd earned his position through skill alone. None of that mattered now. Darian ran. He vaulted over fallen beams, shouldered through panicked courtiers, his lungs burning with smoke. The main staircase had collapsed, so he took the servants' passages he'd learned during his first anxious months of service. Black flames licked at the walls, wrong in every way that fire could be wrong, cold at their edges, hungry in their hearts. The Queen's wing was an inferno. 6 bodies in dark cult robes lay in the corridor, cut down by her personal guard. Of those guards, Darian saw no sign. The carved doors to Lyanna's chambers stood open, bent on their hinges. Through them, he could see the impossible, a wall of swirling flame that seemed to breathe, pulsing with malevolent life. Every survival instinct screamed at him to turn back. Instead, Darian thought of intelligent brown eyes and a rare smile, and he charged forward. The moment he entered the flames, the world became pain and light. Heat seared his exposed skin, smoke choked his lungs, and then, impossibly, the fire recoiled. It parted around him like water around stone, opening a narrow path through burning air. Darian didn't question the miracle. He stumbled through into the chamber beyond. Lyanna knelt beside her overturned bed, one hand braced against the floor, the other pressed to her ribs. Her silver gown was torn at the shoulder, revealing an angry burn along her collarbone. Soot streaked her face, and her carefully pinned hair had come loose, falling in wild waves around her shoulders. She looked up as Darian burst through the flames, and shock flashed across her features. "You," she began, then coughed violently. A ceiling beam groaned overhead. Darian crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Lyanna to her feet. She gasped, whether from pain or surprise he couldn't tell. The chamber was collapsing around them, and the cursed flames were creeping closer, feeding on tapestries and ancient wood. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," Darian said, and lifted her into his arms. Lyanna stiffened for half a heartbeat, then her arms came around his neck in a grip born of pure survival instinct. She was lighter than he'd imagined, though the thought felt absurd given their circumstances. Her face pressed against his shoulder as he turned toward the flame wall. "You'll die," she whispered against his ear, her breath warm even through the suffocating heat. "Not tonight." Darian didn't know where the certainty came from. He tightened his hold on her and ran at the fire. Again, the flames parted. This time Darian felt something else, a responding pulse from the woman in his arms, as if her heartbeat had suddenly synchronized with the living fire. Lyanna's fingers dug into his shoulders, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. Then they were through, stumbling into the smoke-filled corridor. Darian didn't stop. He navigated by memory and desperate instinct, choosing paths away from the worst of the fire. Lyanna stayed silent against his chest, her face hidden in the crook of his neck. He could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse where her throat pressed against his collarbone, could feel the way she trembled, though whether from shock, injury, or something else, he couldn't determine. A section of wall exploded inward, showering them with debris. Darian twisted, taking the impact on his back and shoulders while sheltering Lyanna with his body. She made a small sound of distress, her arms tightening around him. For one suspended moment, as burning fragments rained down around them, Darian looked down and found her staring up at him. Her eyes were impossibly wide, pupils blown with shock and something that looked almost like recognition. "How?" she breathed. "How did you walk through the fire?" "I don't know. The truth, stark and simple. I just knew I had to reach you." Something shifted in her expression, something vulnerable and wondering that made his chest ache worse than the smoke inhalation. Then another beam crashed down nearby, and the moment shattered. Darian ran on. The palace was a labyrinth of fire now, but he knew one escape route the attackers might have missed: the old postern gate near the kitchen gardens, used mostly by servants and rarely guarded. He burst through a door into the blessedly cool night air, crossed the herb garden in a dozen running strides, and finally stopped only when they'd reached the tree line of the Whisperwood. Only then did he carefully lower Lyanna to her feet. She swayed immediately, and his hands went to her waist to steady her. They stood like that for a long moment, both breathing hard, the sounds of screaming and burning fading into the distance behind them. Lyanna's hands rested on his forearms, and even through his scorched sleeves, her touch felt impossibly warm. She looked up at him, firelight from the distant palace reflecting in her eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that made something deep in Darian's chest constrict with an emotion he couldn't name. "You walked through flames that should have killed you. You carried me through an inferno without hesitation." Her fingers tightened on his arms. "Do you understand what that means?" Darian shook his head slowly. Behind them, another explosion lit the sky. Lyanna's gaze never left his face. "It means," she whispered, leaning closer, "that you belong to me now." The Forest of Whispers. The Whisperwood earned its name from the way wind moved through ancient pines, creating sounds like distant voices. Darian led Lyanna deeper into the trees, following a deer trail he discovered during his early days in Ashvaran when solitude had been his only comfort. Behind them, the palace burned against the night sky, a beacon of destruction that made his chest tight with grief. "Here," he said softly, guiding her to a moss-covered stone beside a narrow stream. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, turning the water silver. Lyanna sank onto the stone with visible relief, though she kept her spine straight, every inch still a queen despite her torn gown and disheveled hair. Darian knelt beside the stream, cupping water in his hands. When he turned back to offer it to her, he found her watching him with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You should tend to that burn," he said, nodding toward her shoulder. "You first." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "Your back took the impact when you shielded me." "I'm fine." That wasn't a request, Sentinel Voss. The use of his name startled him. He'd never imagined she knew it. Wordlessly, Darian turned his back to her and carefully removed his scorched uniform jacket. The movement pulled at bruised muscles, and he couldn't quite suppress a wince. He heard her rise, heard the whisper of silk and the soft pad of bare feet. She'd lost her slippers somewhere in their escape. Then her fingers touched his shoulder blade, featherlight and cautious, tracing the edges of what was probably an impressive bruise. "You could have died." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You should have saved yourself." "No." The word came out rougher than he intended. "I couldn't." Her hand stilled against his skin. The silence stretched between them, filled with cricket song and the distant rush of water. When Lyanna spoke again, her words carried the weight of a confession. "I need to tell you something. Something I've hidden from everyone except my closest advisors." She moved around to face him, and in the moonlight her expression was vulnerable in a way he'd never seen. "Do you know the old stories of the Flameheart bloodline? That your ancestors could command fire," Darian said slowly. "But those are just legends." "No." Lyanna pulled her torn sleeve aside, revealing intricate silver runes that seemed to shimmer against her skin. "They are real. I am Flameheart blessed. These bindings were placed on me when I was 16, to suppress my power. The council feared what I might become." Her voice turned bitter. "They feared I might actually rule, instead of being their decorative figurehead." Darian stared at the runes, his mind racing. The fire that parted for me was responding to me. To us. She met his gaze directly. "When you entered those flames, when you touched me with such single-minded determination to save me, something broke in the bindings. I felt it crack like ice under spring sun. And I felt something else. She reached out, hesitating just before touching his chest. May I? He nodded, not trusting his voice. Her palm pressed against his heart, and warmth bloomed beneath her touch. Not the heat of fever or fire, but something that felt like sunlight distilled into liquid form, spreading through his veins. Darian gasped, and Lionel's eyes widened with recognition. You can feel it, she breathed. The connection. When the bindings cracked, when you carried me through fire that should have consumed us both, our flames recognized each other. I don't have flames, Darian managed. Everyone has fire inside them, the spark of life, of will, of passion. Yours burns stronger than most. Strong enough to walk through cursed fire. Strong enough to. She trailed off, her hand still pressed against his chest. The old texts speak of this. The flame heart chooses its own guardian. Someone whose inner fire resonates with theirs. Someone who can withstand their power without being consumed. The implications of her words settled over Darian like a physical weight. You're saying I'm bound to you now. I'm saying fate made a choice when you refused to let me burn. Lionel's thumb traced an absent pattern against his sternum, and Darian's breath hitched at the intimacy of the gesture. The shadow cult attacked because someone told them about my bloodline. Someone in my own court betrayed me. I'm vulnerable now, Darian. The bindings are breaking, and I don't know if I can control what's coming. Without thinking, Darian covered her hand with his own, holding it against his heart. Then I'll help you. You don't understand what you're offering. To be a Flameheart's guardian means binding your life to mine. My enemies become yours. My battles, my dangers, all of it becomes yours too. I walked through fire for you, Darian said quietly. I think I already made that choice. Something fierce and tender flickered across Lionel's features. She stepped closer, her free hand coming up to rest against his jaw. The touch was electric, and Darian's pulse thundered in his ears. Then I need you to understand something else. Her voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. When a Flameheart chooses a guardian, it's not just a political bond. It's intimate. Sacred. The old queens took their guardians as consorts, bound to them in every way that matters. Darian's world narrowed to the woman before him, to brown eyes that held both vulnerability and strength, to the warmth of her touch, to the impossible reality of this moment. Lionel, he said, using her name for the first time, tasting the forbidden sweetness of it. She shivered at the sound. I need you to be certain. Because if we do this, if I mark you as mine, there's no going back. In answer, Darian slid his hand from her chest to her waist, drawing her closer. I've been yours since the first moment I saw you, he admitted. I just never imagined you might want me to. Lionel's smile was tremulous and real. Then we're both fools. She rose on her toes, bringing her face level with his. Because I've noticed you, Darian Voss. The sentinel who stands straighter than anyone else. Who treats servants with the same respect as nobles. Who I've caught watching me with such longing in his eyes. Before he could respond, a distant sound shattered the moment, the baying of hunting hounds, echoing through the forest. They're tracking us, Lionel said, tension flooding back into her frame. There's an old shrine deeper in the woods, Darian said. We can take shelter there. As they moved into the deeper shadows of the Whisperwood, Darian felt Lionel's hand slip into his. The simple contact felt more significant than any oath or ceremony. Behind them, the hunt grew closer, and ahead lay uncertainty and danger. But for the first time in 3 years of secret longing, Darian allowed himself to hope. Oaths in shadow. The shrine had been abandoned for decades, its stone walls covered in moss and its roof open to the stars where tiles had fallen away. But it was defensible, with only one entrance, and hidden enough that their pursuers might pass it by. Darian cleared away debris while Lionel sank onto a relatively intact stone bench, her exhaustion finally overtaking her aristocratic composure. Rest, he urged. I'll keep watch. I can't rest. Her voice was strained. Can you feel that? Darian paused, and realized he could, a building pressure in the air, like the tension before a thunderstorm. It seemed to emanate from Lionel herself, waves of heat distorting the air around her. "The bindings are failing faster than I thought," she said tightly. "When they fully break, my power will surge. If I can't control it..." She looked up at him with barely concealed fear. "I could burn everything within 100 yards. Including you. Then teach me how to help you control it." "Darian, you don't understand." "So make me understand." He crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. "You said our flames recognize each other. Use that." Lionel studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The technique is called grounding. A flame heart in distress can channel excess power through their guardian, letting it dissipate safely. But it requires physical contact. Sustained contact." "Show me." With visible hesitation, Lionel reached for his hands and placed them on her shoulders. Even through the fabric of her torn gown, her skin felt furnace hot. "You'll need to stay calm," she instructed. "Focus on your own center, your own fire. Let mine flow into you, but don't try to contain it, let it pass through." Darian nodded, though he barely understood. He focused on the feeling of his hands on her shoulders, on the warmth spreading from her into him. It started as a trickle, then built to a stream, then to a flood. Power rushed through him, vast and ancient and fierce, the accumulated magic of a bloodline that had commanded flame since before kingdoms had names. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right, like something missing had suddenly clicked into place. Lionel gasped, her head falling forward against his chest. "It's working," she breathed. "I can feel it. You're grounding me." The power continued to flow, and Darian adjusted his grip, one hand sliding to the back of her neck while the other moved to her waist, drawing her closer. It wasn't calculation, just instinct, the sense that proximity would help. Lionel didn't resist. Instead, she melted against him, her arms coming around his ribs. They stayed like that as minutes passed, their breathing synchronizing, their heartbeats finding the same rhythm. The pressure in the air gradually eased, and the dangerous heat faded to a manageable warmth. When Lionel finally pulled back enough to look up at him, her eyes were luminous in the darkness. "That shouldn't have worked so easily," she whispered. "It takes most guardian pairs months to achieve that kind of resonance. We did it in moments. Maybe we're not most pairs." A smile ghosted across her lips, there and gone. "No, we're really not." Her expression grew serious. "But this means the bond is even stronger than I thought. Darian, if the shadow cult finds us here, if I have to use my full power to defend us, you'll need to ground me through the entire battle. Can you do that?" "Whatever you need. It will be intense. Overwhelming. You'll feel everything I feel, the rage, the fear, the exhilaration of letting the fire free." Her gaze searched his face. "And there's one more thing. To truly complete the grounding bond, to give you the protection you'll need to withstand my flames in battle, I have to mark you." "How?" Instead of answering with words, Lionel cupped his face in both hands and kissed him. It was nothing like the chaste kisses of court romance. This was fire and need and 3 years of suppressed longing igniting all at once. Darian's arms tightened around her waist, pulling her fully against him as he kissed her back with equal fervor. Heat bloomed between them, literal heat, flames that didn't burn but danced across their skin, writing themselves into existence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darian felt changed. He looked down at his forearm and saw a mark that hadn't been there before, an intricate pattern of flames rendered in lines that glowed faint gold against his skin. "The flame kiss," Lionel said softly, tracing the mark with reverent fingers. "The brand of a flame heart's chosen guardian. You're protected now. My fire will never harm you. And..." She hesitated. "And everyone who knows the old ways will recognize what this means. That you're mine, in every sense of the word." Before Darian could respond, the baying of hounds shattered the moment. They were close now, too close. "They found us," Darian said, rising and drawing his sword. Lionel stood beside him, and as she did, the last of the binding runes shattered with an audible crack. Power exploded outward from her in a wave, and flames erupted from her hands, not the cursed black fire of the cultists, but pure golden fire that illuminated the shrine like dawn. "Stay close to me," she commanded, her voice resonating with ancient authority. "Ground me through this." Darian moved behind her, his chest against her back, his hands on her waist. Through their connection, he felt her gathering power, felt her reaching for the flames that answered to her blood. When the first cultists burst through the shrine entrance, Lionel met them with a wall of fire that made their cursed flames look like guttering candles. And Darian held her steady, anchoring her to humanity while she became something magnificent and terrible. They would survive this night. And in the morning, they would return to the capital, together.
2 days of recovery had transformed their dynamic. Zareth moved with increasing ease, though Rajan still watched her with protective attention that made her skin warm. They worked together to fortify their position and gather supplies from the surrounding wasteland, falling into a natural rhythm that surprised them both. "Your tactical instincts are impressive," Zareth observed as they returned from a scouting mission. Rajan had identified 3 escape routes and 2 potential ambush points without her needing to suggest them. "Spent enough time in hostile territory, you learned to think like the enemy." He set down the supplies they'd scavenged. "But watching you analyze terrain is like watching an artist work." The compliment, delivered with genuine admiration, made her pulse quicken. "Flattery, Rajan Thorn? Observation." His eyes held that intensity again, the look that made her feel simultaneously exposed and treasured. That evening, they sat by a small heating element that served as their campfire, the twin moons rising overhead. The temperature dropped quickly in the desert night, and they sat close together, sharing warmth. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rajan's voice was soft. "You've saved my life and nursed me through fever. I think we're past formalities. Have you ever, with humans, has there ever been romance?" She smiled at his sudden awkwardness, so different from his usual confidence. "No, military life didn't leave much room for personal connections. And you?" "One serious relationship years ago. She couldn't handle the uncertainty of loving someone in combat zones." He paused. "I told myself I wouldn't risk that kind of connection again." "Told yourself," she repeated, catching the past tense. "And now?" He turned to her fully, and the hunger in his eyes stole her breath. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice rough, "but only if you want that too." In answer, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, exploratory, learning the taste and feel of each other. Then Rajan's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and consuming. His mouth moved against hers with passionate intensity, and she responded with equal fervor, her fingers threading through his hair. Every touch felt electric, every sensation heightened. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zareth saw her own desire reflected in his eyes. "Rajan," she whispered, and the sound of his name on her lips seemed to undo something in him. "Tell me to stop," he said against her neck, pressing kisses along the silver column of her throat. "Tell me this is too fast, too much." "Don't stop." Her hands found the fastenings of his tactical vest. "Don't you dare stop." They undressed each other slowly, reverently, each revelation of skin a discovery. His hands traced the silver patterns that marked her body, learning every curve and plane. She explored the warm brown expanse of his chest, marveling at the differences and similarities between them. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that made her chest ache. Rajan moved with patient care, reading her responses, adjusting to bring her pleasure. She matched his rhythm, their bodies learning a language beyond words. "You're beautiful," he breathed against her skin. "So incredibly beautiful." Under the alien stars, wrapped in each other, they found a connection that transcended species and circumstance. What began as physical desire transformed into something deeper, an emotional intimacy that left them both vulnerable and exhilarated. Later, as they lay tangled together, Rajan's fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. No regrets? Zareth turned in his arms, capturing his lips in a soft kiss. None. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner.
Crown of Fire and Heart. The coronation renewal ceremony was traditionally a private affair, a quiet reaffirmation of vows between monarch and realm. Lionel transformed it into a declaration. The Great Hall had been rebuilt in record time, now decorated with flame motifs that honored rather than concealed her heritage. Every noble house had been summoned, along with guild representatives and common citizens. Darian stood in the antechamber with Lionel, watching her adjust the traditional crown of Ashvaran, gold worked with rubies that caught the light like captured fire. Nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. But not of them. Of myself. Of making the wrong choice. You won't. You're remarkably confident for someone whose life is about to become exponentially more complicated. She turned to face him, magnificent in ceremonial robes of deep crimson and gold. Last chance to walk away, Darian Voss. Once we step through those doors, once I do what I'm about to do, there's no going back to anonymity. In answer, Darian rolled up his sleeve, revealing the flame mark that had become more intricate over the past weeks, spreading in delicate tendrils up his forearm. I stopped having anonymity the moment I walked through fire for you. I choose this. I choose you. Lionel's smile was radiant. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. Then let's give them something to remember. The ceremony began with traditional elements, the oaths of protection, the pledges of justice, the symbolic presentation of crown and scepter. Lionel performed each ritual with flawless grace. Then, as the final blessing was being pronounced, she raised her hand for silence. There is one more matter, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. A truth that has been hidden too long. A power that was suppressed out of fear. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Darian felt tension coil through their bond, but also determination. I am Flameheart blessed, Lionel declared. The gift of my ancestors runs in my veins, as it has in the royal line since the founding of this kingdom. For years, I wore bindings to contain that power, to appear safely normal, to be the queen you could control rather than the queen I was born to be. She raised her hand, and flames bloomed from her palm, golden and beautiful and utterly controlled. Gasps and a few screams echoed through the hall, but Lionel's voice cut through the chaos. I wear those bindings no longer. I am Flameheart, and I will rule as such, not as a tyrant, but as a protector. My fire will burn for this kingdom, not against it. She turned, her gaze finding Darian where he stood at the base of the dais. And I will not rule alone. Darian climbed the steps to stand beside her, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes on him. Lionel took his hand, holding it up so all could see the flame mark on his arm. This is Darian Voss, who walked through cursed fire to save my life. Who stands as my guardian, my anchor, and by my choice, my consort. The Flameheart has chosen its own, as is its ancient right. The hall erupted. Nobles shouted protests, commoners cheered, and chaos threatened to overwhelm the ceremony entirely. Then Lionel released Darian's hand and raised both of hers high. Flames erupted throughout the hall, not destructive, but decorative, pillars of golden fire that harmed nothing but silenced everyone. This is not a request for permission, Lionel said into the awed silence. This is a declaration of how things will be. I am your queen, but I am also Flameheart. I will take counsel, but I will not be ruled by fear, yours or anyone else's. The laws that prevented royal marriage outside noble houses are hereby abolished. The restrictions on Flameheart abilities are lifted. And anyone who cannot accept this is free to leave my court. She lowered her hands, and the flames vanished as if they'd never been. In the silence that followed, Darian watched nobles and commoners alike process what had just happened. Then, from somewhere in the common section, someone began to clap. Others joined, until applause filled the hall, not from the nobility, but from the people. After the ceremony, in the privacy of Lionel's chambers, newly rebuilt and decorated to her taste rather than centuries of tradition, she finally let her composure slip. Darian caught her as her knees buckled, the cost of maintaining such perfect control through the ceremony hitting all at once. "I've got you," he murmured, carrying her to the settee by the window. "Did I just destroy the monarchy?" Lyanna asked weakly. "No. You just saved it." Darian sat beside her, pulling her against his chest. "You showed them a queen who's powerful and human. Who won't hide what she is but won't abuse it either. That's what they needed to see. Half the noble houses will probably rebel. Let them try." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You have fire, remember? And you have me." Lyanna tilted her face up, her exhaustion warring with something warmer in her eyes. "Promise me something. Anything. That we'll always be honest like this. That power won't change us. That you'll tell me if I'm becoming what they feared." "I promise." Darian cupped her face in both hands. "And I promise that I'll love you whether you're a queen or a common woman. Whether you have flames or not. I love you, Lyanna. Just you." "Just me," she repeated wonderingly. Then she kissed him, and it felt like coming home. Later, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Lyanna created small flames that danced between her fingers like living jewels. Darian watched, still awed by the casual display of power that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. "What are you thinking?" Lyanna asked. "That I spent 3 years watching you from a distance, never imagining this could be my life." He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, and she leaned back against him. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real." "Believe it." She guided one of the flames to dance across their joined hands, warm but harmless. "We walked through fire together, Darian. Everything after that is just learning to live in the light." Below them, the city of Ashvaran spread out in the twilight, its lanterns beginning to glow like earthbound stars. Somewhere in those streets, people were probably still debating the coronation, the scandal, the changes to come. But here, on this balcony, there was only a queen and her guardian, wrapped in each other and the gentle warmth of controlled flame. "I love you," Lyanna whispered. "I love you too," Darian replied. "My queen. My flame heart. Mine." She turned in his arms, her smile brilliant. "Yours," she agreed. "Always yours." And when they kissed, flames danced around them both, a crown of fire and heart that needed no gold, no ceremony, no approval but their own. They had chosen each other against all odds and reason. They would face whatever came next the same way they'd faced the burning palace. Together, unafraid, and blazing with light.